Welcome to the Intentional Household Podcast. I'm Laura Wilson. Today on our episode, we have two wonderful educators from Oxford Learning High Park, Anna and Lovleen, talking all about tutoring. Whether your child is struggling, thriving, or somewhere in between, they are here to talk all about the benefits of tutoring and how you can support your child's learning journey so that you and your children can live more intentionally and harmoniously together. Anna and Lovleen, welcome to the Intentional Household Podcast. Before we get started, why don't you each tell us a bit about your background?
I've been a teacher for 20 years. I've taught in the public system. I've taught in the private system. I've taught adults. I've taught children. And now I've been the director of Oxford Learning High Park for the past 13 years. And and we've been working together for that long.
Thank you. And how about you, Anna?
So I was born and raised originally in Odessa in the Ukraine. As a child, I was sick so much and I missed so much school. And because of the teachers and tutors, I regained my strengths, regained my confidence. And so even since I was a child, I knew I want to be a teacher. I want to save all these kids and make their life beautiful. So after graduating from high school, I entered the Odessa State University and I graduated with master's in math and education and worked at orphanages, worked at the Odessa High School, but not for a very long time because we immigrated to Canada. And even though I love teaching so much, I was so dedicated to it, my English was so primitive. And I had to learn the English first before I could go back into the classroom. So I worked for almost 17 years at IBM. I started as a programmer, became program manager, worked at accessibility, finished my career there as an instructional designer. And then when my third child was born, I knew I cannot be in the corporate world anymore. So my husband has supported me and we bought the Oxford Learning High Park Center 13 years ago. And ever since, I've been very, very happy and content because I do what I love.
Well, it's interesting how you mentioned your childhood because when I was growing up in Stratford, Ontario, there was a population of about 30,000 people. Tutoring wasn't a thing. I don't know anyone who was tutored as a child when I was growing up. But now that I'm a mom and I have school-age kids, it very much seems like tutoring is the norm. I was under the impression growing up that you only had a tutor if you really were struggling. And that was the only population who really used a tutor. So who is a tutor really for?
Personally, I think it can be for anyone. And I think it's because a lot of parents went through the public school system, so they think that the public school system is a great fit for their kids. And I believe in the public school system, and I think it can be great. There's amazing teachers out there. I think parents aren't aware that it's changed a lot. And so what they might want to do is supplement their child's learning, not because, again, public school can be great, but the problem is that society has changed. We have two working parents usually in a household, so parents don't have the energy to commit to their children for the schoolwork aspect. The other aspect is that teachers are really stretched thin. So there's a lack of funding for resources. So teachers can't reach every child's potential anymore. It's not because there's not phenomenal teachers. It's just the way the system is. And so I personally think that tutoring can be a great tool for a parent just to check in and see how their child is doing, and also just make it a part of a routine so that it's not necessarily seen as a reaction to a problem, but it's a proactive solution to prevent the problem.
So as parents, if we want to take a proactive approach to supplementing their education through tutoring, at what point is it a good time to enroll our kids in tutoring? Do we want to do it early on or wait until we see signs?
If you're proactive with things, you basically ensure a smoother life for yourself, for your child. For example, when we teach kids who come to us in grade 2 or 3 and they're struggling with reading, we observe how those children already have their anxiety popping up, their self-esteem is suffering. So myself, the moment I bought the center, I enrolled my child, and that's where my older child learned how to read, my younger child learned how to read, and they've never had stress of not being confident that they cannot master something at school. It's not that necessarily that they've never been challenged at school. Of course, there would be something new, but they knew that they have a team, that they can tackle everything, and they were learning instead of worrying in the classroom.
Mm-hmm.
So personally, if the family can afford to start early, and it's not necessarily to fix something, it's just to enrich a child with something, give him extra powers, because more confident you are, easier it's for you to learn, because at that point your mind is completely open and you're absorbing the information rather than struggling.
What stood out to me was when you said they have a team, because the reason we reached out for tutoring was because my husband and I, we're 2 people, we have 3 kids. We wanted support for our eldest, and we just didn't feel like we had the capacity. And so now she has a team of support. But what about parents who they may not have 3 kids? They may have 2 kids. They may have 1 child. So they may actually have the capacity to be supplementing at home with reading, and they may be teachers themselves. I was going to ask if there are any benefits to them seeking outside support when they may feel like they have the capacity to educate their child.
If you can tutor your child, kudos to you, and you should do it. What we find is that for most parents, it's a very emotional process.
Mm-hmm.
Children do not want to disappoint their parents. So my son, for example, loves math. He'll show me math all day long. But if I ask him to write a sentence, he doesn't want to do that because that he doesn't feel so great about. So that's when the battle begins, because he knows that I might not like his sentence. So you can, if you can tutor your child and you feel like it's not an unhealthy dynamic, by all means, go for it. I think that it's nice to have someone to outsource some of that anxiety and
Mm-hmm.
emotional dynamic to, because there will be a point probably that will come where that child will fight you about it. And I always tell parents, focus on the fun stuff, like reading to your child, talking about stories, like other things. Whereas asking them to perform is sometimes that's the thing that causes that emotional dynamic to just go awry. And having a team that will support you while you do that makes you focus on your child in a different way, I think. So I don't teach my own child. I think I'm a great teacher, but I would never teach my own if I can help it because of that emotional dynamic. And I recognize that.
Yeah, I can see for us how it's really allowed us to have a relationship with our child that's fun. I mean, of course, we have structure, routine. There are things that our kids have to do, but we can really focus on when we're together to do things that are fun and keep it light. And for the education part, we can use that third party so that our time is used in the way we want to spend it together. And it doesn't affect our relationship. Because I imagine that if you are using a tutor, you can get greater results. And there isn't that pushback as much as a child may push back with their own parents.
Yeah. And as a parent, you might not know exactly what the expectations are. So that's another reason why you might want to talk to a teacher and see what the child should actually be doing. Whereas you might have your own ideas of what the expectations are. So that's another reason why you might want to do it. Send them to a tutoring center or a teacher or whatnot. As a teacher, you may know what the expectations are, but again, that emotional dynamic, I mean, your child knows when you're upset or disappointed or frustrated too. So that's why sometimes it's hard to teach your own child because they can sense that. And that's where some of that emotional dynamic comes into play.
Yeah. You may think as the parent that you can disguise your emotions, but they very much can read it.
Of course. Yeah.
Of course.
They know you as well as you know them.
So your tutoring is based out of a center. Are there any benefits to using a center versus say, an individual or having someone come into your own home?
For sure, because when we talk about the teaching, teacher is only one part of the equation.
Okay.
Because we do rely on the curriculum. And for the major learning centers, for example, like Oxford Learning, like Sylvan, Mathemasium, Spirit of Math, etc., those centers, those organizations put huge effort on designing curriculum.
Okay.
And when they were designing curriculum, they put in consideration what is not covered. Why, for example, certain areas are more challenging. And I could speak about math for hours, how many gaps we have in the curriculum. And that's why a lot of kids don't get it. They're afraid. Or about the language, for example. How many people know why, for example, we spell this word this way and that way? They all have, for example, R's.
Mm-hmm.
But you can't spell this way or that way. Will you be able to explain it to your child?
No.
And things like that. Yes. But everything has a reason.
Okay.
And for
Yes.
example, for the children who are, say, language is not coming as easy for them. For example, kids with certain type of dyslexia, for example, they need to know the rules. Then they will apply them, and then they will be confident reader. They will be able to spell and write and not to be in a worry state that they're constantly making mistakes. So those centers put a lot of effort into covering those gaps and making sure that there is flow, that there is step-by-step, that information is given in a very systematic and comprehensive way. So, for example, if you visit our center, you'll see a wall of materials. And when we accept the child into our system, we typically start with the assessment. We know where the strengths are, what child is really, really capable of doing, and where the gaps are. So when we build the program, it's never just like, oh, you don't know multiplication, so we will never teach you anything else because you're across what is 6 times 7. However, maybe there's other things which they can comprehend, like higher concept as algebra and things like that. So we will create the program which is right, which covers the gaps, but also builds on the strengths of the child. For the tutor to do that granular programming would be very, very difficult, if not impossible. Also, another thing is, as human beings, we tend to go on vacations, we get sick, or we change jobs. And then if you are completely reliable on that one individual, comes your test or exam, and you're really counting on that help. And here we are, your tutor is very sick. So what do? At the learning center, typically there is good communication. All the teachers, all the admin knows where a child is, what the program is, and anybody from that center will be able to step in and make sure that the child gets support. And also another thing, one person can be great at something, but another will bring another rich point. So more individuals you're exposed to, more richer, more comprehensive your support would be.
Yep.
So many benefits. And one more.
Yeah.
So a lot of kids, for example, and not kids, every person, for example, when you come home, you feel this is my zen, this is my time to relax. That's why, for example, working from home a lot of times a challenge for a lot of adults, because then there is no boundaries between the work and rest.
Yes.
And the same thing is for our kids, because when they come to the learning center, their brain automatically conditioned, this is my learning space. I'm here to learn.
That is such a great point because as adults, I know for myself, I think about what it's like working from home and all the distractions that there may be. And I think that a lot of parents aren't taking that into account for their own kids. They just expect them to be able to do their work wherever and whenever.
Yeah.
So really allowing the home to be the safe space and then that center outside of the home to be their space to do the extra learning.
Yeah. And also there's other students there.
Mhm.
So then they feel that atmosphere as well, that, oh, this is like a classroom. So we're coming here to learn. So that distinction is there too, that separates from the home environment.
And they don't have their siblings around who would be
Yes.
distracting them.
And toys.
Yes, and the toys.
food.
Just so many different things.
Yeah.
Or just like having a closed door, but then hearing on the other side of the door, like, that sounds like fun. I want to be there instead with my family.
One thing we can also do is that, after a while, the child gets comfortable with a certain tutor and they might actually start to do less work because they want to chit chat with the tutor that they've bonded with for 6 months or so. And so for us, we can say, oh, you know what, let's swap this around a bit just to change the dynamic so that we can make the sessions as productive as possible. It's not a punishment to the child, but sometimes the child does get comfortable. They're just using the time maybe not as efficiently as possible. And so we can make that change and then put them back with that tutor just to remind them like, oh, you're here to work. That happens. We hear that from parents all the time that their child might like their private tutor, but it's just not as productive because they're chatting more about like their personal stuff than focusing on the material. So that happens too.
That's right. And I don't want to be that parent to overhear it and say, okay, guys, it's time to get started.
Like I'm paying for the time.
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
exactly.
Yeah. But I mean, there were so many good points there. You said a systematic approach. That's going to speak to me every time. I love a good system and I love accountability. I love seeing that my kids are making progress. And I would worry that I wouldn't be able to see that quite as well if they were with just an individual who was coming and saying like, what should we work on today?
Yeah. And I was going to say like a lot of times we're not working on homework. So again, there's a structure to the program. There's a goal for the program, whereas homework often is just kind of a Band-Aid solution.
Okay.
What we're trying to do is close learning gaps and then get them up to certain levels for things or accomplish certain skills. And again, with homework, that's not always a tangible result because the tangible result is just finishing the homework.
Okay.
But do they know their multiplication tables? That's a goal.
If they are seeing a tutor, should the tutor be sending them with work to do on their own time?
Like the tutor assign homework? We don't really do that.
Okay.
We mostly utilize the time in the session. We can always give homework if the parent requests it. There's only a few skills I feel like homework should be assigned for, and that's things that you have to memorize, like multiplication tables or practicing addition, subtraction facts, those kinds of things, because they have to be like rote. And so definitely practice for that helps. And coming 2 times a week to our center, the progress will be a little bit slower if they're not doing a little bit at home.
Okay.
But we don't usually assign homework.
Except a few cases. So in our center, we're quite popular for preparing kids for various exams. For example, if you decide to change the system and apply for the private school, a lot of parents come with the surprise. It's not just like I pay a lot of money. No, because to get into the private school system, your child typically goes through rigorous testing with materials which are above the grade levels.
Okay.
They have to practice their interview skills, advanced math, things like that. And so in order to prepare the kids for those exams, because even though every school states that they never test on anything above the curriculum, somehow the questions tend to be much harder. So, and we want our students to be confident and feel prepared. So for those students, we do give them homework because if they see us only twice a week to cover that much of a material, they need to petition in order to retain the information. Because retention of the information and repetition are inseparable. So for those, we would give the homework, and they typically practice between the sessions because they're covering vast amount of materials. We also sometimes support the families who are going on the longer vacations. So for example, we're working with a child who is learning to read, and they're mastering their long and short vowels and blending, and they just starting to read and just starting to understand what they just, not mechanics of sounding the words, but actually the sentences they started to comprehend. And then the family plans a month's vacation. And if the kids want to work on the books, which they are familiar with, because that removes anxiety and it has a structure and the flow. So we would support that family by giving them a homework package. Ooh. So they could take it with them, continue working. So when they're ready to resume, there's no that gap. It's not like, oh, I forgot everything, I need to go back. So there are situations when we do give homework, and sometimes we don't, because we want kids to continue enjoying, because typically we very rarely see kids who don't like coming to our center.
I think as a child, if my parents told me I was going to tutoring, I wouldn't have been for that. But I see that my kids enjoy that, and they see Oxford as a safe space. So is there a way for parents to frame this so that it is a positive, supportive place for your kids to go versus somewhere where they don't want to go?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of kids are nervous about tutoring just because it has such a negative connotation to it. But that's why one of the things that we do first is the assessment, so that the child can see the space first, meet us, and then also they'll see all the other kids there. And I always tell parents, just tell them it's a reading club or whatever they're coming for, because then they will think of it as an activity as opposed to something related to schooling.
Okay.
And that's how, for my son, both of us, we started our kids very early. My son started at 3 learning phonics and things like that. And now it's just a part of his routine. He never thinks of it as some sort of punishment. It's always that, oh, we're doing Oxford. It's just an activity. And so I think the assessment, again, helps us gauge where that student is, and that helps us meet them where they are. So then again, they're not intimidated by the work because we're not giving them necessarily in the material that's at their grade level, because they might not be there. And then that also kind of lulls them into, oh, I can do this, and makes them feel confident. So that's kind of one of the perks of bringing them to our center, and just not intimidating them, essentially.
I can see how the earlier you get them started, the better, because it just becomes the norm for them.
It's the routine. Yes, it's like giving them a bath every night. Yeah. It's just a part of their routine. Yeah.
And also right now, it's summer is approaching. It's upon us. And for example, we do run summer camps. Even right now, sometimes when we chat in the car, we're driving somewhere, and my kids would come up with some really complicated scientific knowledge. I was like, where did you learn that? I know this is not part of the school curriculum, and I know I didn't teach you that. They're like, from Oxford camp. And we make it so fun, so interesting, and so enriching. But that is a very easy to get your child very comfortable that learning is something interesting, something enriching, and not a punishment. Because nobody gives you marks, but you just learn, you do the experiments. And when you start the year, suddenly you're not scratching your head.
I'm glad you mentioned the summer, because you also mentioned taking a long vacation. And I thought about, well, summer is like a long vacation, a couple months long. And I think that some people have the idea that kids should be taking a break all summer long. And then there are the other families who think they should continue learning. So is there a best approach for this so that they have some downtime and they are continuing to learn? What do you two think about summer education or
Yeah.
to continuing the tutoring?
Well, we're big fans of it. And I think, again, it's also to help parents ease that transition into the school year. Taking a 2-month break from routine is really hard for some kids. So if you have a consistent routine where you're still practicing a little bit of reading, a little bit of writing, a little bit of math in the summer, and you know, they're not in school, so they shouldn't be as tired,
Okay.
hopefully. So a couple of hours a week of tutoring, I think, is a good routine. And again, it helps them feel a little bit more confident going into the school year, that they've already been practicing some of those things. So they're not nervous about starting the new school year with a new teacher, with new, kids in the classroom. It's also just good to practice a little bit of everything because, again, in the classroom, your child might be really great at something, but maybe the teacher doesn't have time to give them the attention they deserve so that they're not going to that next level. Unfortunately, the way that the classrooms are set up, you're teaching a little bit to the majority. And anyone who's an outlier, the resources aren't there, whether it's that they're not meeting the expectations or they're ahead. And so even the enrichment part isn't happening. So this is also an opportunity to create a learning environment at home during the summer or an expectation where they can also, they're not confined within the parameters of the classroom. They could be more creative, even, with problem solving or doing whatever, journal writing over their summer or something like that. You can make it a lot more fun and it doesn't have to be within the confines of time.
Okay.
And again, they can explore a little bit more in their own learning style. So I always think it's a good thing. For me, I just do it so it eases that transition into the school year.
Okay.
If they've gone 2 months without doing any math or any writing, September's going to be rough.
Yeah, that's a rude awakening.
Yeah.
And I also want to add that there are certain years where the transitions are steeper. For example, if your child is in grade 10 and starting grade 11, the jump in the curriculum is so huge. And if a child has been struggling with certain concepts in mathematics, for example, math is my specialty, I highly recommend for the parents to do the early planning and actually during the summer, make sure that there is no gaps because the steepness of complexity is exponential. There are certain years during primary, because, for example, the jump from grade 2 to grade 3, because in grade 3, the expectations are that child is a fluent reader. So suddenly in math will be a lot of problem solving. And if your reading comprehension is not on par, you can't understand what they're asking you for.
Yeah, you're just trying to be able to read.
Exactly. So there are certain critical years when if year before was okay, maybe the other year probably craving some time for the learning would be an advisable idea.
So if we are going to think about the unique learning needs in terms of age or grade, what would they be starting with the youngsters, JK up to grade 2?
So I would say a game changer for those grades is literacy, just reading. Studies show that if you read early, it just makes you so much more successful in school because almost everything is based around reading. Even math, you have to read some instructions. So the expectation isn't quite there in JK and SK to be reading, but you actually are supposed to be reading, but they don't really tell you that. And they don't tell parents that they should be doing something at home to foster that.
No, they don't.
So yeah, there's a disconnect, I think, between what the school district is saying that their system is. I mean, they're changing it now. They've added a phonics portion to the curriculum. So they're trying to address that now because in grade 1, you're expected to read, but nobody tells the parents that really.
No.
You didn't know that, right?
No, didn't know that.
No. And so, so it's a shock for a lot of parents. They've also brought in testing this year to address that also. So this is the first year I think parents are getting a concrete idea of where their child is. Whereas before they didn't really have that. So I think there is a change coming, but if parents know that my child should be reading between the ages of 4 to 6.
Mhm.
And it helps if they can read the earlier, the better.
Okay.
Then I think that would be great for parents to know. Just
Okay.
if the school districts gave that piece of information, I think it would be so helpful to parents.
Okay. JK to grade 2, get the literacy down.
Yes.
What about grade 3 to grade 6?
I think it's more grade 3 to 6. It depends. If your
Okay.
child is still struggling with basic of literacy or certain math concept, of course you would like to support them. But also at that time, you already could see that, oh, my child is really strong with mathematics.
Mhm.
And my child is bored. And for example, boredom is almost as bad in the classroom as not being able to perform, because then your mind becomes dull. And for example, you might feel that, well, I would like to supplement because I could see my child is different. My child can do more. So then you can engage with tutoring not as a recovery mode, but as an enrichment mode.
Okay.
And we do a lot of grade 3 to 6 enrichment because that's where kids could feel that this is my specialty. That's where I can be successful. And that kind of rolls into the middle school because, again, middle school is critical. But at the same time, we find that you see great teachers in grade 1 to 3, 3 to 6. But in grade 7 and 8, often because the materials become more complex. So the teachers who are specializing more in the language arts, for example, we see more complex assignments, more development, but math sometimes is really, really lacking. And it's shocking. And then another teacher would be strong in math, and you see the rich curriculum they bring in, and they're sometimes struggling because it's very advanced. They are using Waterloo math as problem of the week and things. And so there is big discrepancy. That's where the teacher to teacher, very different.
Okay.
But you want to prepare for the high school. You want to make sure that you are confident to stepping into the new building, into the new classroom, and you're really ready to have that high school experience.
I would also mention that from 3 to 6, like building vocabulary and writing skills is really important.
Yeah.
And I think also that is, the teachers don't have enough time to give the kids attention for that. For good writing, you need a lot of feedback so that you can keep improving. And I think, again, it's just that the teachers are stretched thin. They don't have time to sit with each student and say, how can we make this sentence better? So that part is really important, I think, from 3 to 6, because those are building up skills to essay writing and things like that in the future. But problem solving is a big one too. A lot of kids can compute beautifully, but then you present them with a problem and they can't discern what the problem is asking. So having critical thinking skills as they get older is important too. So not just saying, what is 5 plus 5, but having a problem where they have to make that calculation and pull out that information. So problem solving is a big one in the middle years.
Yes.
And
they always
vocabulary.
like say, I don't know what they're asking. Too many words.
I remember that.
Yeah.
I was like, I just don't
and
even
you probably
understand.
were a great reader, but it's not about reading necessarily. It's about conceptualizing.
Yes.
That's the difference. So so that's a very interesting thing, just getting kids to practice that skill.
Okay.
Because for us as adults, we've practiced it enough. So now it doesn't seem like it was ever hard. But for children, they need to practice.
Yeah. So then let's get into high school, because high school, very different. And within high school, different unique needs. So what, like 9 and 10, would they be lumped together?
I think so. I think 11 and 12 are really different because you're also preparing for university. Grade 9 and 10 are almost transition years where you have to get used to the semester system, being independent and responsible for your own study habits. So I think study skills comes really big into grade 9 and 10.
Okay.
Sometimes kids, up to grade 8, they've been just okay.
Yes.
Because they're still treated like children in some sense. But high school, you're responsible. So you have to hand in the assignment and nobody's going to remind you. So it's a little bit, that transition is a bit difficult for some students to handle because they've never really had to develop those before.
The study skills, those are huge because I remember not knowing how to study. And it wasn't until university, I think, when I really figured it out.
Yeah.
But it would have been nice to know in grade 9.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Or at least start building at that time. I wanted to mention the transition to the high school because, for example, we always talk about the mainstream children, students, but there are students who are advanced athletes, who are advanced in certain fields like physics or mathematics, who are musicians. There are specific schools which cater for those kids with those exceptional skills.
Okay.
But exceptionality does not come just with the talent. Exceptionality comes with a lot of hard work, a lot of after-school work, and a lot of times, even if we think, oh, that child is very good in music or this child is very good in one particular sport, but a lot of times, if they go to the specific university program, they have to be also strong academic because there is competition and they have to prepare for extra exams. Like if they go into the, say, to study in Europe, in UK, for example, it's a very popular destination because of the language. They need to take AP courses. What does it mean, AP course? It means that you are learning at the high school the materials of the first year of university. Or you have to take SAT, ACT exams to be competitive in the US universities. And at that level, the school, which particular school they go, matters a lot. So would you help some of those advanced or exceptional children who are going in those specific niches to prepare for those advanced courses, advanced exams like AP, ACT, SAT?
Yeah, you can really set those individuals with the very unique needs up because you do have that experience.
Yeah, and also sometimes the schools, it's just nice to get a second opinion from somebody else. You know, the guidance counselors will try to help you as much as you can, but just to know what options you have. Not everybody knows what is available post-secondary or whatnot. I would also say one thing about high school is obviously study skills are important, but the curriculum is quite extensive. But sometimes the gap between subjects is quite long because if you have math the first semester in grade 11, but then you don't have it until the final semester in grade 12 or, whatever, that's a long time not to do math. So that just practicing skills in between that time is really important. So that's another aspect of the study skills that lots of students don't think about. They think, oh, well, I don't have math this semester, so I don't have to do it. But it's always good to do a little bit of math if that's what you're interested in pursuing long term.
That's such a good point.
Yeah.
I never thought about that.
Yeah, I know. I never did. I didn't do semester in my grade 11 and 12 years. So I remember, I think I did math all year long. How are they squeezing this curriculum into 3 months? I mean, they do it for hours a day, but it just feels like not long enough when I think about it.
Yeah, and there is dependency on the subjects because physics, for example, depends on mathematics. And if you start physics and then mathematics next semester, then you don't have a foundation to actually work with the concepts.
This has been such a helpful conversation. And when I thought about tutoring and how beneficial it is for kids, it didn't occur to me just how beneficial this is for the parents as well. And to have access to you and to be able to ask you questions and have your guidance throughout the school years. Because yes, I can support my kids by signing them up, but there is such a gap and there's a lot of information that as a parent, I don't know. So being able to use you two as a resource is also incredibly helpful. and just having the access to you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Everyone should have a teacher friend.
Yes, yes, exactly.
Just to know this kind of information.
Mhm.
Yes.
For any parents who are on the fence about signing their kids up for tutoring, do you have any words of advice?
I would say, think of it like your health. You go to the doctor, not always when something is wrong. Sometimes you go for a physical, right? And you're just doing a check-in. I think tutoring can be considered like that. That you are getting feedback from your teacher, but that's one person and that person's experience with your child. I think it's always important to go to somebody else and just say, what do you think? And what can I do to maybe foster something that isn't being fostered at school? Not because the teachers aren't phenomenal. It's just that there's constraints in a public system or a classroom. There's time constraints, depends on who's in the classroom. So to me, I always think, if my child is interested in math, why wouldn't I foster that interest? We always think of activities like sports and arts and things like that. And parents don't think of school because they're in school for so long. They don't think of necessarily fostering anything related to school. But again, what if your child is an amazing writer, but they just need someone to give them that push. So again, just think of it as a check-in, just to get a second opinion of, is there any way I can support my child in these fundamental skills that they might not be getting that feedback from at school?
And how about you, Anna? Any words of advice for parents?
Well, when I bought the center, my child was 5, and that's where he learned how to read. Right now, he is finishing grade 11, and we're working on the university applications. That's how I'm very familiar about all the expectation of the high school. The time flew very quickly. And for example, he wants to go into the engineering. Do you know what is average mark is expected to apply for the mechanical engineering, for example? Well, if you don't, I will tell you 96%. And how do you get to 96% in a year? It's impossible. You have to be a strong student most of your student life because curriculum is tough. More we support our kids, more we give them solid foundation, more enrichment they can have, less stressful it would be the years of high school. The landscape of our universities is very complex and very challenging. High expectations. We are also competing with the international students. So start early, continue throughout the school year, and you'll spare a lot of anxiety once they reach the high school because time really, really flies. So that would be my advice.
And before we wrap this up, anything else parents should know?
I think that parents need to know that they should advocate for their children as much as possible. I don't think the information is as transparent as it could be coming from the school districts about what the expectations are. And again, I think a lot of parents think that the school system is similar to when they went to school, but lots of things have changed. So for example, kids don't fail anymore. Kids are placed in grades because of age, so not your ability. So that means in a classroom, there's a lot of different capabilities happening, and the teacher has to target their lessons to that. There's also a lot of feedback not given, a lot of things that we used to take for granted, like multiplication drills. They don't do that anymore, but that's something you have to practice over and over again. And so a lot of kids are having these kinds of gaps just because the system has changed philosophically, but the expectations are still the same. Okay. And then again, they get a big surprise when they go to high school. So advocate for your child. Ask the teacher concretely, what does my child need to know at this level so that they can address that.
For any families who want to learn more about Oxford Learning High Park or book a consultation, where can they find you?
They can find us at the corner of Runnymede and Bloor West. We're on the second floor. It's a bright, open space, and our doors are open every day at 9 o'clock, and they typically close at 8 p.m. And we're very happy to take a call, email, meet in person, greet with the child. Our doors are open year-round.
Thank you, Anna and Lovleen, for joining us today. If you like this episode and want to learn more about Oxford Learning High Park, check us out on Instagram. We will see you for our next episode.